What's going on, Dragon Ballers? Welcome back to another player interview, a special player interview, because my boy, Alex Friedman, did a great thing this weekend. So, Alex, introduce yourself. How'd you do this weekend? Go for it.
What's up? I'm Alex Friedman. I got second place at the Niagara Regionals, and with Gogeta Shenron, I think it's the best deck in the format, and I'm here to talk about it.
All right, so getting into the list here, obviously it's Shenron leader. You're not playing ramp, which is pretty interesting. We haven't seen Gogeta be particularly relevant in a few tournaments now. So why Gogeta over like Shenron or Purunga ramp?
So Ryan Seven and I were basically talking about this deck, and we've been working on this deck for a little bit of time, and we basically came to the conclusion that if you resolve Gogeta 7, you win the game. Just about every single circumstance. Whether you're killing them or you're just putting them to 3 and setting yourself up defensively, it just seemed basically unbeatable once you resolved the effect. And so the idea of the deck was just to streamline not dying and then getting Gogeta off by turn 4. So that was kind of why we chose it.
Gotcha. So like the ramp kind of seems like irrelevant sometimes.
So it also left a lot more room for like defense. It had a lot fewer like dead cards. It just kind of like it seemed like it worked more consistently as far as the deck was concerned. I think you sacrifice a little bit of power, but in exchange you get a lot more consistency. And generally speaking, the ceiling of Shenron is high enough to where it doesn't really matter.
Yeah, I can agree with that. But were there ever times where, like, I don't know, you got Chomp of the Trickster or Ultra Instinct Goku, and like, you know, obviously you didn't take a lot of losses this weekend, but like, were there ever threatening situations where, like, on the clapback you were kind of scared, or you always just felt like resolving Gogeta 7 that pretty much sealed the deal?
Yeah, so it basically came down to Gogeta 7. So basically the only battle cards that you're playing that are really susceptible to a lot of the counterplays are the Shenron Figure of Majesty, and you just kind of choose not to play them in the matchups, especially when the decks are leaving up 2 or 4 energy. And so that's kind of the biggest thing. But the strongest cards in your deck, the Ultimate Fusion Gogetas and the Gogeta Hero Revives, basically resolve their effects whether or not your opponent has a counterplay, and both of them are incredibly powerful whether or not they have to stick to do damage, right? And more often than not, especially with Gogeta 5, you're not really using them to do a lot of damage, at least, you know, the second you play them. And so you can kind of afford to take those small negs to really just enhance your board state and to like put yourself in a position to win the game.
Gotcha. If you had to tell me that this deck was doing the most busted things in the game, I could definitely agree with you. So, the Dragon Ball count. Why no 1-star? Why no Super Dragon Ball? I do feel like Super Dragon Ball is really good in this deck, but give me your explanation.
So Ryan Seven and I basically agreed that the one thing that would lose you the game is tapping out. And so that kind of answers the questions for both Super Dragon Ball and 1-star Ball. I think 1-star Ball was really, really strong because it gave you a lot of options as far as discarding the cards you wanted to world peace later, or just getting rid of like dead cards, or even just getting rid of a world peace that you would get back for free when you awakened. But at the same time, it came with tapping out. And in the mirror, it's really, really bad because it allows your opponent to do the same thing for free. And so it kind of came to that conclusion. The Super Dragon Ball, I think, is really, really powerful in the mirror match because it allows you to do things with radar, and it just really allows you to set yourself up without advancing your opponent's game state. But really, it was just a matter of like getting as much advantage as possible with Dragon Ball.
Gotcha. So the one radar, I got to know why one. Was it just the 50th card, or is there like a special reason why there's only one?
Yeah, it's really the 50th card. I think now going back, I'd probably cut Bean to 3, but again, like it's hard because you have to charge enough blue, and so that's kind of where Bean fits in. I think Bean really is the worst card in this deck, which is like a weird thing to say, you know, having played the DBS card game for so long, but I think Bean is absolutely the worst card in this deck, and it's the most cuttable card, and so maybe it would be like 2 radar, 3 Beans going forward.
Yeah, I can kind of see it just because, you know, you're not ramp where you need to resolve like multiple world pieces in a turn, like hard casting. So I can kind of see that.
Well, it's
So
also just a matter of offensively, Bean is really weak because you barely generate attacks before you need to,
mhm.
right? Like the only cards that can attack in the deck, like that you're actually going to put on board are the 1-drops. So you have to see a 1-drop, and then you also have to like have an attack target or your opponent's leader and just kind of like use that to Bean, and that just felt really weird. And so I think Bean got charged more than any card.
Yeah, I can definitely see that for sure. And then the 6 negate lineup. Did this feel like totally necessary? Like what made you come to the conclusion of 6 negates?
So Ryan actually played 2 Dende, 2 Kami, and then 3 Power Burst, and then I decided on the 4th Power Burst, essentially because if you don't die, you win the game. Like your ceiling is above every other deck in the game besides the mirror, and whether it's Gogeta 7 or Demigra or a combination of multiple world peace targets, it just kind of felt like as long as you get to your 5 energy turn or your 4 energy turn, you were basically in a state where you couldn't lose. And so the multiple negates allowed you to like really just, advance your game state, draw as many cards as possible, and then as long as you didn't die, keep going. Just don't tap out.
Got it. So your sideboard has me really curious. We'll get to that in a few minutes, but like you have these particular silver bullets in the main deck, 2 Dende, 1 Kami. What was the rationale behind these silver bullets? Because a lot of Shenron lists I see don't even play any silver bullets in the main.
So actually, when I played this deck at Orlando, I had the blocker in the main, the one that came out in set 7, the rare, that drew a card. And I thought that card was incredibly powerful because, one, it was just generic. There was no matchup where it was like not good or it didn't have a positive effect. Like a blocker was just always a blocker. And I also thought it would be really powerful against Kaioken in the mirror. And I was right about that, but it turned out like Dende was just way more powerful. And so Kami and Dende being in the main deck, like it allowed you an opportunity to absolutely blow out your opponent, which I thought was more important going forward. Like against Shad and Swiss especially, I was able to Dende him twice, and then like it was unwinnable for him. And I think that like blowout potential was a lot more powerful than just like the generic always decent part of the blocker.
Gotcha. And then we have, going forward a little bit, we have the 1 Goku Vanilla and then the 3 UI. So me and you talked about this a little bit. I know that UI was like an MVP for you, and I'm pretty sure, like you said, if you had a 4th UI, you would have just played it. So I guess, is that true? And then you could talk about a little bit how UI performed.
No question, I would have played the 4th UI. There is technically a scenario where the Vanilla is like the better option, and it's very specifically getting a card off of board, like using it as a battle card attacker when you revive it with your Shenron Figure of Majesty. But like that's such a niche case. It never came up. I doubt it would really ever come up like importantly. And so yeah, I would play for the Goku. It's just a much better card. And then going into the Ultra Instinct Goku, I just think the card is insanely powerful. It absolutely says, number one, I'm not dying this turn, and number two, I'm not really threatened this turn, especially because this deck is so much a tall format rather than a wide format. So whether it's Big Mira, whether it's the ape in Broly Apes, whether it's Gogeta, whether it's any of like the targets in this deck, the card is insane. It furthers your game state. It draws you a card. It gives you an attacker, which is important in certain scenarios to hit them to certain life. And just generally speaking, it's like so powerful. And like it's very telegraphed, which is very interesting because if you're leaving up 4 energy, your opponent's like, all right, I'm pretty sure he has something like this. And because obviously this deck isn't playing multicolored to play counterplays or anything like that, this card is very telegraphed, but it doesn't really matter whether it's because it's counterplay and counterattack. You just kind of use it optimally, and there's not really a way for them to play around it.
Did the counterattack ever actually come up?
Yeah, actually it does. So the big thing is that you can draw it when you get Gogeta 7'd. Mm-hmm. That's a big part of it. And then additionally, if you're a Shenron opponent is using like at all costs to try to kill you, you make them take the life first and then you do it. There's a couple scenarios.
Gotcha. That's actually a really, really pro play. So going over to Shenron Figure Majesty, 3 is definitely the more consistent number. A lot of people play 2. And I'm kind of curious why there's no Purunga 3 drop in the list. Like, did you never feel like you needed it? I feel like one of the tougher matchups for Shenron is U6 aggro. Maybe you don't feel the same way, but like you do have the 1 Kami for it. So talk about that a little bit.
So admittedly, I agree. I think U6 is probably one of the toughest like mainstream matchups. I also think the Gogeta deck that Frisco played is like another really, really difficult matchup for this deck. The decks that are really low to the ground, it can put a lot of different attackers on the board and just kind of like ping you for cards. And so I think that's kind of a worry, but I didn't think Purunga was like really an efficient answer in any regard to that. Like it was just very slow, especially if you were objectioning on 2, it was never on curve. And so while you didn't want to tap out, it just kind of didn't feel as efficient. Whereas the Shenron play felt a lot more efficient. It felt like a better world peace target. And I never really wanted the Purunga. And then like the draw 2 effect seemed kind of powerful in a vacuum. But even then, I think I'd almost always rather have the Shenron Figure of Majesty untapping an energy and sacrifice that 1 card. It just kind of like didn't seem like it earned the spot. But if I did face any U6, I guess I probably would have had a different story. Maybe the Kami would have come into play more. Maybe I would have just been able to survive.
Gotcha. So you think going forward you would maybe consider teching it more for U6? I mean, it's probably not the most popular matchup, so maybe it's not worth the main board tech, but what do you think?
I think it would be in the side deck if anything, because I think the main deck is defensive enough to where like if you draw optimally and you're able to go quickly enough, especially if you go first, you're in a position like with Senzu beans or just super combos or enough negates to where you can survive with 3 or 2 life and then basically kill them because they're killing themselves.
Gotcha. So going through the rest of the list, pretty standard, but then you have the Demigra Secret Rare, and I know you're a huge fan of this card. Most lists don't play it, so talk about this a little bit.
Again, so a lot of this goes to Ryan Severin. I was before Orlando and I was not playing this card, and he's like, I think you're insane for not playing it. I played it for like 3 games. I was like, all right, you're right. This card does absolutely everything. The second it doesn't get counterplayed, you win the game when it comes down. I just like I can't see how this card isn't played. It comes down on 5, which is way faster than the ramp decks can even play Victory Strike on 8. So that was like the only other consideration as far as an ultimate was concerned, like siding Victory Strike. And I just think Demigra does so much to the decks that like try to avoid Gogeta by keeping a low hand size. So a lot of people were saying like what Toa can do is they can just kind of avoid Gogeta 7 and they can hold their awakening so that they can negate it. And so they'll never really die to it, and then they'll strip your hand and everything like that. And I was like, if they're gonna do that, if they're always turning their battle card sideways against me, I'm just gonna Demigra them, take their entire hand, kill their battle card for free because it's a 40k plus however much they're comboing, and it just really solves that problem. So the decks that basically try to play around Gogeta 7 get Demigra'd, and then even more importantly, because of the way World Peace is and how you can play it for free, you can Demigra plus World Peace before that, and so you have these 2 threats that are taking out their board and their hand, and it's just like an onslaught. I think the card is insane.
Gotcha. I gotta say, I'm pretty convinced on that now. So going over to the sideboard, very confused. We're gonna talk about it. So Bulma seems pretty obvious. The Black Mass Sand seems like it's for U6 and Pan. Kami's good, and we come to assemble the squad in the side deck. Now that is a super interesting pick. What was the logic behind this card in the sideboard?
Yeah, absolutely. So the assembling the squad does 2 things. Number 1, it plays a 3rd and a 4th copy of every single 2-drop and below in your deck, which is important, right? So as opposed to siding 4 Toa Dimension Leaper, right, and like not having as much space in your side deck, you're siding a 3rd and 4th copy of that essentially for free because it also is every single other card in your side deck. Additionally, even more powerfully, it's every single one of those 2 drops for free from your deck. And so like a card like Son Goku Striving or Toa Dimension Leaper obviously do nothing if you don't draw them, right? And they're terrible World Peace targets. And so like you basically have to play them, and you have to use 2 mana to play them, whereas you can play assembling the squad for free, bring them out, continue your plays, and so like it allows you to play through the side deck without disrupting your like normal like game plan. Because again, I think if this deck just does what it's supposed to do, which is not tap out, play Objection on 2, Shenron on 4, Gogeta on 5, it really should just win every single game it plays. And assembling the squad allows you to do that and also play your side deck so as not to lose with things like Son Goku Striving or Dimension Leaper or Dark Power Masan or any of the cards like that.
Gotcha. I gotta say, I like that. I like that rationale a lot. So now the one Whis, what's that going in against? I'm really struggling on that.
So
one.
that actually goes in against the mirror, and so it allows you to kind of go taller than them and higher than them, which was kind of the idea behind that. And so the big thing, the one Whis, I think now going back, I would actually change the side deck a good amount for very specifically the ramp matchup. But the idea going in was that you would get the Whis and you would use the Whis to go to 6 instead of 5 before them. And then you would World Peace the King Vegeta. And you would just, the second you were able to kill them with your hand, because like it's so predictable, like it's very easy to tell what the Shenron player has. The second you knew you'd be able to kill him, you'd combo it off and you'd win the game. And so the King Vegeta allowed you to stall with the Whis against it. And what the Whis led you to do is go to 6 instead of 5 after your turn 4.
Gotcha. So those are both coming in against ramp. And then what do you want the 2 Fu Shrouded in against?
Basically anything that goes tall. So it was obviously insane against Gen. Like it absolutely obliterates the matchup. It makes it free. It's very difficult to lose if you're able to like World Peace out Ultimate Fusion Gogeta and then Fu Shrouded, or Gogeta Hero Revived and then Fu Shrouded, something along the lines of that. Because they're obviously going to give you time to get to 6 or 7 energy, and then you basically just blow them out with that. So that was mainly what it was for. It was that and the Bulma were for Janemba. But like any deck that basically tried to go over the top of you, which is some ramp decks and everything like that, it's very powerful.
Gotcha. So I know you mentioned you would change the side deck up a little bit. We've covered the whole list. Any other changes, like maybe in the main deck you'd make, or any ideas you have?
In the main deck, I mean, other than the vanilla Son Goku, I mean, maybe again, I try to find a bean, but it's difficult without cutting like a lot of blue and like not being able to charge optimally. Additionally, I'd probably stick with the 6 negate lineup and like the 3 1-drop lineup, but I would probably try to fit blockers either in the main over the Kami or in the side deck, because I agreed with Ryan that every single matchup that Dende is not good in, i.e. the mirror, the blocker is just way better in, and then every matchup the Kami is not better, it's vice versa. And so the blocker was basically always good, but it wasn't necessarily always better than like the blowout 1-drops that I played. Additionally, I'll talk about the Black Massane in the side deck, because this is a card I actually find very interesting and I use, I think, very differently than a lot of people. So I side this in against any matchup that's not trying to kill me. And then obviously the matchups is really good, like Pan and U6, like you talked about. And so the big thing with Dark Power Black Massane is against matchups like Toa, against the mirror match, it allows you to like take cards from your life, which is something you never get to do against those matchups, especially if the Toa player is playing it more of a control matchup. Especially because Shenron can look at his life, you can use Dark Power and Black Massane to like force attackers to kill battle cards, especially if they're turning their Vegeta sideways in the Toa matchup. But then at the same time, you're like, okay, you look at your life, you see that you have 2 at all cost Vegetas in your life, and you have a Gogeta and a Goku in hand. You start digging for that Vegeta because you know it's in there. And so I use that a lot, especially when I knew I wasn't going to be killing myself.
Gotcha. I like that rationale a lot. That is a problem against those types of decks where you can't ever see your life. So I definitely agree with that. Now, we don't have to go too deep into the matchups. Now, you 2-0'd Pan, you 2-0'd Red Broly, you 2-0'd Skillus, you 2-0'd the Ramp matchup, and then you beat Janemba 2-1 in round 6. But round 1, you took an L to King Vegeta, and I just got to know how that happened, because that seems like a weird scenario.
Yeah, so this was the player that actually got top 8, Luke D'Ambrosio. I think I'm pronouncing Canada. He's a great guy, and he's a really talented player. He and Anthony Mikulev worked on the deck a lot, I think. And so, first of all, the deck does put a lot of pressure on you. So if you aren't able to basically execute your game plan, or you have balls in life, or it's just like it doesn't work out for you, they're very much able to kill you, which was a problem, but like something I was trying to avoid. So game 1, I awakened pretty late, and then he also secret rared me on 5, and so he put me from 3 to 0, and that was kind of how that happened. So nothing I could really do about that. Game 2, I had 2 balls in life, and then also awakened turn 4, which means not only did I have the 2 balls in life, but I didn't see one of the odd numbered balls any of the next 3 turns, and so that just makes it really difficult, because your first world piece is going to be on 5 instead of 4, which becomes a lot more difficult. And it's just like your deck really, really struggles in exactly the instance where you don't see a ball by turn 4 or turn 3.
Yeah, I can definitely see that. Awakening and Shenron is really unlucky and really unfortunate.
Exactly. And the 2 balls in life, it just means you're starting at 6, and they're really capable of putting a lot, especially the Kefla in their 3-mana turn. And so even though I went first, the draws weren't there. It was first day, I got the rust out on that first round, and you know what? It worked itself out afterwards, especially because I'd hoped, knowing he was a good player, that he'd carry my breakers. It ended up not mattering, but I actually think I ended up carrying his. So.
Gotcha. And then any other matchups like in Swiss or top that you want to talk about?
Yeah, so I'll talk about the matchup with Shad, because I played him and I 2-0'd him. That was the ramp player played in Swiss, and then obviously we played again in the finals, and it went very differently. So this deck, I think, was definitely built to beat the mirror, or the Shenron mirror, whether that's ramp or Gogeta or anything like that, because it was very streamlined and very consistent. The idea was that you gave them no leeway, and you just executed your gameplay as optimally as possible, and then maybe you Dende them if that happened. Like that was kind of your game 1 matchup against the mirror. And so both games against him, the deck did exactly what it was supposed to do. It worked pretty much all day, and it worked against him. Every single game, I Dended on 1, I had a Dragon Ball in hand, I had Objection on 2, and I had Gogeta on 5. And I think Shenron on 4. I don't remember if I killed him with crit or not. But the point is that like there's absolutely nothing the ramp deck can do when they're put to 3, and they're obviously facing like an attacker. He had if he drew one of the 4 negates in his deck, he would have lived with 2 life and a lot in the drop, and probably not really a way to kill me, especially considering I had power burst in hand. And then that happened both games. Like there was just nothing he could do. In the finals, though, it obviously went a little bit differently. I drew a little bit poorly, and the deck was just like a little bit clunkier. And admittedly, he drew out of a situation where I was pretty much sure the game was locked up. He had a Purunga tapped on his side of the field and 5 cards in hand. And I played the Demigra knowing that I could not attack his life and I could basically take his entire hand. And so I attacked the Purunga. He chose not to negate, which I thought was interesting. But at the time, Demigra was my only battle card. And so he wouldn't have been able to remove it with Purunga, just draw 2 cards. And so he chose not to negate. And he revealed his hand, which was 4 battle cards and a Weeze's Coercion. I took the 4 cards, knew he had the negate, and I pretty much knew the game was over in the next turn or two. But he was able to draw into, I think, a Dragon Radar, which got him a Super Dragon Ball, which got him an Adult Cost, which took him 2 life, and he got the game in about 2 turns after that, just because I lost a lot of my sparking effects. But I did not think he'd be able to come back from that. So I think he played the matchup very well, especially with the hands he was given. I think he did everything optimally, but sometimes the cards are in his favor, sometimes the cards are not. So I think that's what happened in the finals.
Gotcha. Sometimes the heart of the cards, but nonetheless, great play all around. And Alex, congratulations again. Any shout out you want to get to? I know you shout out Severin like 17 times, but one more time for good luck.
So Ryan worked on the deck. Absolutely props to him. He's an incredible player. He topped himself with basically the exact 49 of 50 cards, and absolutely destroyed the tournament with him. Shout out to Scott Dashy for lending me a bunch of cards, especially the Ultra Instinct Gokus. I was able to pick them up before they hit $200, but in the meantime, I really appreciate it. And then obviously shout out to all the people I used to test. So you, Danny, Cam, Corbin, and anyone I'm forgetting. Oh, Jordan Markle. Anyone I'm forgetting, I'm really sorry. And then obviously all of the Canadian players in KTM Canada, because they were awesome hosts. It was an amazing venue, and Carta Magica for throwing an incredible event. Seriously, if you guys don't go to the Canadian events and you have the opportunity to, you're missing out. They're super clean. They're super well run. They're just it was an absolute pleasure playing with them.
Awesome, Alex. Thank you so much, and we will see you guys next time.